가상 제 델레시나 주바미 세다디니 자다 가상을 가르치었으네 세디 잠기 안에 지가도 네마다 류롱주 코르당 담년다 소리야 차체 언도스제 되베나 안에 지기 최제가 되니 말이스 게시 안에 아직 최로 제베이나양 안 담년다다 코르롱주 중요하게 되니게 더네 군롱 뒤더네 주름다 짐바소 짐바다와서 제베이나야 안디 최야다와데 차교 말이스 어두스진의 쉬지 안다 가제 는 가르쳐 오래서네 세디라 신바마기비 탑람디 는 가르쳐 오래서는 여기에 제치와 메다와섬다다 로제디에 다와 템부메바 메다바섬다 안디 치외제 최마도신 관계야 판도 메바디 두신 섬다리 아니 세디라 신비 신바도네 개와치마 아니 취지야기다 돈얘기 좀 받기 기리에스 안디네 자다는 저게 디네기야 되네 림바기야 되네 가르쳐 오래서네 당한지 공원을 마선다 당보 겸줬음게지 디네는 저게 잠니지로 삼다 디네 심지어 탐지도 산요고 반토버쇼 세비기다 디네기 삼 공원으로 디네기 디제라데 융아 있으면 되네 산요고 바토비치도 융아 있으면 되네 아니 녀션의 뇌비자와 가야 지금에 선배 삼다야다 소리를 류로제 탐지샤리아 짐바다 당기 선배게 삼로금 다야 되네 젠리아 신기 수술의 뇌버전의 델리아 안에 콘로 말아 안주스 뇌는 뇌바기 마기바지 되도바지기 선배 삼다야다 어디네게다 기회 냠는 제대로 맞아 야부레 선배게 가와금네지 능의 무티시 지기 선배 삼다야 되는 것도 모두시는 냠는 제대로에서 가상도 안 되는 쉬어로.
Good morning. So yesterday we started to look at this verse, this very brief text by Sachen Kunga Nyingpo, and parting from the four clingings. And we looked at the first line: if you cling to this life, you are not a practitioner. And we saw there that clinging to this life, this refers to clinging to this one life alone, and all that that entails to one's reputation, what others think of you, one's wealth and possessions, one's friends, power and influence over others, and so forth. And how by having a mind that's focused merely on this life and this life's pleasures and problems, one is unable to engage with the Dharma because one's time and energy is so consumed by such thoughts and resulting activities. But if one has created sufficient causes in the past to have both met the Dharma and have interest in the Dharma, and is trying to cultivate the Dharma within, to the extent that one is still clinging to this life, one is not engaging in genuine Dharma practice, because the amount of attention one gives to the Dharma is negligible compared to the amount of attention that goes to this mere life. And moreover, one will be engaging in Dharma practice so as one's honest motivation for engaging in the Dharma practice will be judging it against the benefit one receives in this life. Is this life going better or not? So recognizing that this is such an impediment to actual Dharma practice, we then, in the second session yesterday, turned to the antidotes. And primarily, this is thinking about impermanence. And impermanence, we reflect on in two general categories. One is impermanence in relation to this life and the opportunity that this life presents, recognizing that we will all die and that the time and manner of our death is completely unknown, which means the amount of time we have left to cultivate the genuine Dharma within is finite, and it can end at any time. This then spurs us on to reflect further in terms of impermanence on the second part, which is all that we value and strive for with regards to this life is impermanent. The reputation we want, the comfortable material circumstances we want, the kind of relationships we want with others, all of these are impermanent. And we reflect here so as to gain a more balanced approach to the attention we place on these things, recognizing they serve a purpose, but not this exaggerated purpose that we have believed thus far. So there, the primary antidote is reflecting on impermanence in these two ways. Impermanence of this life and impermanence on all the various things that distract us so in this life. This then leads us to thinking about lives beyond this and recognizing that I have to accumulate causes for lives beyond this. Here then, in the meditation that I then presented afterwards, impermanence was the first part. Then this moves into the second part, which is recognizing I have to accumulate causes for excellent rebirths. But that alone is insufficient, even if I attain another good rebirth like now, because I remain trapped in cyclic existence. So here one gives rise to a wish to gain freedom from cyclic existence. Then, in the second part of the meditation, one turns with a mind of refuge to the three jewels, recognizing that by placing my wholehearted trust in the three jewels and striving to cultivate the Dharma within, in this way, freedom will be gained. The third part of the meditation is recognizing that everyone else, whether human or non-human, is no different from me in wanting to experience only happiness and be freed of suffering. But all other fellow ordinary beings are bound in the same way that I am. And then we generate the wish, may all beings be free of suffering. May all beings abide in lasting happiness. We generate love and compassion. And we generate love and compassion to the point where we generate actual bodhicitta, or we generate bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha so that I can lead all beings to a state freed of suffering. This is the third step of the meditation, bodhicitta. And the first was the reflection on impermanence. The second, and taking that to the point of wanting to attain liberation, then refuge, and then bodhicitta. And now the fourth part, having set oneself on the wanting to attain enlightenment for the sake of others. One then meditates on the four practices that I mentioned yesterday. One meditates on ethics, that in order to become a Buddha, I have to live within the restraints of what is ethical. I must ensure I do not harm others through my way of acting, speaking, or even thinking. And not only must I restrain myself from harming others, I must be of benefit to them wherever I can. I must give of myself, use my material resources, my skills and talents in any way I can to be of benefit to others. In this way, we meditate on generosity. And thirdly, when I experience hardships, I need to have a mind that stays undisturbed. Practice of patience. Whether the hardships comes from others or my own fatigue in training or a feeling that this is too difficult, I need to practice patience. And fourthly, enthusiasm for engaging in virtue, taking a delight in virtue. And this is the practice of enthusiastic perseverance, where one generates delight in virtue, thereby strengthening our determination to cultivate the minds of the Dharma within. So this then, in brief, is what we looked at yesterday.
Dini zadangi kasang duskan kom jadi dusine dusin shuro ine kasang chitigi den jebana kasale gewachimo ondio komo tobi chirdu nakuno de gewachimo ondio komo tobo sho di tobi tobiage dala ni ane tsurimsuya da jimbata sobo kon tsundu zamyadi nyemle jewadi din jewore jine kasang she the nadi disungore.
So whilst I spoke quite broadly yesterday in terms of motivation, in terms of this particular first line of the verse, the motivation is to gain an excellent rebirth. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, one engages in the practices of ethics, generosity, and so forth.
Then the issue where the dinner some in Digi and Gewachimon on Yoko Yata, net Tarboko Toya Chazalia, Jito, what is that the issue.
That being said, yesterday I introduced the great motivation, the motivation of becoming a Buddha for the sake of all beings, because that really is what this training in our tradition comes down to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And if one then even at this point is striving with such a motivation, then attaining an excellent rebirth, liberation from cyclic existence, these come as byproducts because they are required anyway to become a Buddha for the sake of others.
아나들이 당은 저기 타바토비아기 탑람데 순고래 지나데 시디라 감숨라신나 예주민세디 어디든 나셔야래다 감숨라신나 예주민스.
So today we're going to look at the second line, which is about striving for and attaining liberation from samsara in its entirety. So the second line, if you cling to the three realms, which means samsara, you're not a renunciate.
아다 감숨라신나 예주민세데 감숨라신제 신되바이나네 예중어 삼바기 두고 말해서 그러나 더나디서 그래.
The meaning of this first line is, if you cling to the three realms or cyclic existence, you will not generate definite emergence, or you will not become a renunciate. You will not renounce samsara.
감숨세디 안에 되베감다 수감다 수미의 감숨세오래. 지나다 셴바스레디다 되베감 세대 가상 저기 내류 로지 코로니인도 세대 디나데 두고래 되베감. 지난 되베감게 안에 예 최대결이야. 아니 연년다 배지 될이야. 연년다제 너는야 삼다베 배 약보래서 착신지 돼야다. 아니 고마 수감기 아니 니르로제당 되네 되슬야. 아니 착신제야다. 아니 되네기 감고마지 수미 감기 니르로제리야 착신제 두선 착신제 되버이나 아니 되네게 감숨되라 착신제 배 약보래서 되버이나 될라 자두게 삼바기 말레스 제사딩 예중 기도 말레스 예중 맞게나 내 타바토에게 람냠네 지금 말레스 이 맞게나 탈베고가 도두고 말레스 그래 내 코발에 탈두고 말레스 그래.
The three realms refer to the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. Those are the three realms. So yesterday I spoke about the pleasures of the desire realm. When we think they're about the life that people look for, to have fame and reputation, power and influence, abundant material comforts, good health, and so forth. So these are some of the pleasures in the desire realm that we live in, that people aspire to. And we spoke yesterday in terms of the first line, that as long as one clings to these pleasures as being the source of happiness, that is where one's genuine motivation will be towards achieving those. And thoughts of the Dharma, if they arise, will be superficial, because we are judging the success of our life in terms of these achievements or pleasures of the desire realm and the overcoming of problems of the desire realm. But this is similar as well for the two higher realms, so the form and formless realm, where if one is desiring or clinging to the pleasures of the form or formless realm, seeing them as something worthy of striving for and attaining, because that is what happiness looks like. If one is thinking like that, one will not be able to give rise to the wish to gain freedom or liberation from cyclic existence. So what this comes down to is, if one sees a particular state within cyclic existence as being something worthy of striving for, wishing for it, trying to get it, being happy if one attains it. If one thinks like that, how can one be thinking to emerge from cyclic existence? It's just not possible. These two are contradictory. So as long as one clings to any state within samsara, one will not have given rise or cannot give rise to a wish to definitely emerge from samsara.
지상에서 가상시에디 가르쳐왔으니 체디잠기 안내마드연의 야차 두신의 제바이나 아니 디기 개와치마 아니 원디고바 두투 말레스 지상 원디고바 투에 개와 지고 말레스 지상 디니 인자 디마제바이나 니 개나 가와두고 쓰는 가손 말 기도그레스 디니 인자 개와치마 나손레 타지 원디고바 톱고 그래 디자 체디잠래 체디기 아니 치도안에 내말로 로지를 심바 기요만 해서 가상 디니 셰로와 다디 디리디 딜레 갸체다 갸체를 차고다 가상 스네 딜레 갸체시네 다디 데비게 니르 로지 데비 감리야 차선제 봐 마세 아니 감고마 수다 수메 감기 데니기 뭐 감지라 차바데 현지 배야고레디 이 된dünya 차신제 되버이나 아니 감숨의 신으로 신바 차고래 지자디니나 코발을 줘도 말해서 모두 깨쳤던 거래 다가지를 신바기 유들라 니린 쉬에들 되베 되바다 되베 감나 되베게 감기다 네르 롱제 계속 지게 롱제디게 다디네 딜레 공마다 수감기 아니 네르 롱제체 아니 수메 감기 네다르 롱제디 되네게 가서 롱제디겠어 가서 수메 감기 네다 되네게 돈에 삼다이 델레 차선 제바에다 오다디니 차선 제바는 코발을 줘도 말해서
So yesterday, when I was talking about the first line, there one needs to recognize that as long as my mind is striving for, or my mind is desiring the pleasures of this life, as well as to overcome the problems of this life, and is striving to achieve these two, that will serve to block any genuine Dharma practice. Therefore, I need to abandon seeking the pleasures of this life, trying to overcome the problems of this life as a primary motivation, and rather seek a good rebirth, to accumulate the causes for a further excellent rebirth. In this way, one lifts one's focus beyond this mere life to the lives beyond this, and strives to accumulate causes for an excellent rebirth. And that is one's primary focus behind what one does. Then one is engaging in genuine Dharma practice. Here, now in the second line, one broadens one's view. In the first line, the view that is presented is to lift one's gaze from achieving the pleasures of this life to ensuring a good rebirth. So one's a gaze goes beyond this life to the next. Now, here in the second line, one is being encouraged to recognize that actually, as long as I desire any outcome that is bound within samsara, that is not freedom. That is not liberation. I will still suffer. So whether I gain another excellent rebirth like this, or I gain a rebirth of even greater happiness, such as in the form or formless realms, as long as I desire any such state, or the happiness to be found in any such state, I will continue to suffer, because I will remain bound within this prison of samsara. So here, now in the second line, one is encouraged to lift one's gaze, not merely to a good rebirth, but actually to beyond cyclic existence in its entirety, wanting to gain freedom or liberation from cyclic existence. Here then, one is being encouraged to develop a genuine wish for liberation from samsara. So what needs to be renounced is the desire for the pleasures and the desire to overcome the problems that are found anywhere in samsara, and rather to gain freedom entirely from cyclic existence. This is the mind that one is encouraged here to develop.
되발에 타르치 수컴을 깨발렘바에나다 수컴데 빼 지게 내나서 뉴아다 강아 추알베 야고야서에서 비게 삼다제 아직 되발이야 타르게 삼데 되발에 타르치 수컴을 깨발렘 거 집에 되네게 수컴데 빼마서 야고레서 될레 신체 신차제 바 용고를 신차디 되게와 깨발렘 되바 용고래 양 대다 되발에 강아레샤 수를 깨와나 수들에 강아레샤다 수를 타르치 수미게 될래야 네들이 깨와는데 배 야봉서 선배게 되네 수미게 네야 나 자신 계제 될래 깨와 줘 봐. 되네 삼당 용고로와 되네자 감숨을 시험 봐서 가시 되비 감을 시험 봐. 가시 나서 배는 가상을 주셔야지 되비 감을 시험 봐 차고 그래. Masung Dumula Tarashi, Giva Chemong, Hada, Migo, Watoz, Debe Kamla, Shemba Kitty. That didn't Debe come to the Tarajina, Sukamla Yaponsa, this Sugam, the Giva language, some Davina, Sukamla Shindig. That Sukamla Tarash, the Gangash, Dele Tan, Dele Yagadi, Sume come to the Resha, the Giva language, and begin the Tapshi, the Jabana, Sume come machine. Is that the name that comes from the Shemba? Gaga comes from Gawala Sugal, Gawala Shemba Gage, Dustin, Chadan Gage, Shemba Gage, Dushi Deva Yapore, some Shash Devaina, didn't call a Nijun Ki to Mares, Nijun Ki Madumna, didn't Tarbat to Mares on some more.
So a mistake that a practitioner can make all too easily is having reflected well on the sufferings of the desire realm, seeing just how many problems that we have here, they give rise to a wish to emerge from the desire realm and attain a rebirth that is a far greater pleasure and happiness. And there, they may well have heard teachings about or gained experience of the form realm. And they recognize that in the form realm, one suffers so much less than here in the desire realm. There's far less illness and so forth. The suffering is far, far reduced. So this is a far better situation than we've experienced or we can observe in this life. So one may well desire, I want such a rebirth. I want such experiences because it's so much better than now. And similarly, if one achieves a mind of the form realm and is experiencing this greater, far greater happiness, but then comes to recognize, actually, whilst I'm in a far better state in terms of happiness than someone in the desire realm, I still have a form, I still have a body and this form around me. And from that, some problems still come. If I develop myself further and attain the formless realm, rebirth in the formless realm, or mind or the formless realm, then I will have far less problems. I'll experience far greater happiness. And one desires this greater happiness. Here, though, of the form realm. In this way, one is clinging to happiness in one of the three realms, or the formless realm, or the form realm, or the desire realm, believing that if I have a particular situation, I achieve a particular outcome such as these, I will be happy. This is what I want. And then striving for that. To the extent that that is the case, one is clinging to the three realms. And if one is clinging in any way to the three realms, one is not a renunciate, or to translate it more literally, one has not given rise to definite emergence, the determination to emerge from the sufferings of the three realms. So this then is the meaning of clinging to the three realms.
Yeah. That Nyingpo Kharis, that's Mission comes on the Shenda Jigoma, that comes from the Shemba de Dogo or Dobala and Karchores, Nijung, Tarba said, candidate says, Sivena. That Tarba said, Kowa said, comes from the Shenda, the Kowa comes from Kowa, as you call me, or just under Kowas, the lead and Yomobo on the Junior and the Pumboti, Kowas, Kowa. Sanda leda nyomo unjuwi that been shandagan to launch niki sachet and nail de chadan kowe chesi goroda kowe chesi gorwa sesa di odi delen tarbi leda nyomo ungi kewa lemba dile tarsona ane tel tarba se gor leda nyomo ungi kewi kewa dile tar kewa da le jama kien de leda nyomo ungi ke mo wache Gewa Monamna Gewa Bashili Gewa Linguina, Getoina, the Tarbatova is all. Just I led a Nyomo by the Joana, Bangson by the led a Nyomo by Bangbe Bangba Tosona, Tarbades, or Tarbasentis.
That in brief then is the meaning of the second line. So now to look at it in a more detailed manner. To understand, to give rise to a mind of definite emergence, in other words, to be a renunciate, one needs to understand what is samsara. So this term that used in the text, 3 realms, that is samsara, the 3 realms of samsara, the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm. So one needs to understand what is samsara, because if one understands what is samsara, one can understand then what liberation is, because liberation or freedom, liberation is liberated from samsara. So yesterday we spoke a bit about the phenomena of samsara, things that are bound within samsara. So this refers to one's clinging for, desire for, attachment to the various pleasures that we have experienced thus far, whether it's fame, reputation, family, and so forth. Liberation refers to being liberated entirely from those desires as a preceding step. But what it eventually comes down to, liberation is liberation from rebirth under the control of contaminated karma and afflictions. So our rebirth, every life ends, and then we are reborn. This process of perpetual rebirth is something we have no control over. Our contaminated karma and afflictions, it's that has control. It's that dictates our rebirth. Liberation then is being liberated from our contaminated karma and afflictions dictating our rebirth. And this means we are liberated from samsara because we are now free from contaminated karma and afflictions. So therefore, this liberation means being liberated from uncontrolled rebirth due to contaminated karma and afflictions within samsara. This is the meaning of liberation. This is what one is liberated from. Our body is a body of samsara. Because it has come about independent on contaminated karma and afflictions. Therefore, this is a samsaric body that we have. Hence, it is a source in which suffering arises.
lungshuk chewa da chulo jaba da lungsu che da sayam jaba da and denigi and devotike miya le kangal mi dusele mamimpa and denigi dosine kangaro chi yedewa chegoro wada.
Now, the realm we live in, the desire realm, this too is a samsaric realm. And we know this in that it is a source of suffering, a source in which suffering arises. So the very elements from which our natural world is comprised, we are a source of suffering, of heat, of cold, of floods, earthquakes, and so forth.
Da korwege nyomo korwalen drevige tarba se tobana denige tarba tobi tobi gasa degi ani lydige ani chike ngazu lydila bane gengo cha de Nyingpo cha pa ani na zamang boya de yongor kanga de nyokda yorwa da tarba tobi gengi gasa gi tarbe ko hon tobi gen gasa de ju lydige denigi beji ba 충분히 야닝바제 경우가 차도야 다 되게 내가래마 강아체 되네 가요 말래래 당한 줄이야 충분히야 첨보자 되네 가sam질 수보디게 아니 지게 야고매바 되네 강아체 먹을리그로와 타르베 고본 더 되게인게 타르베 고본 더 세겐 가사 되기기 ly라 되네 기교기네 줘야 지당 미다바레데 이내 닝바 차 강아체야다 내 나자 용야다 되네 가고 좀 말래래 제사다 ly를 되네 매래 지나다 데니기 네디게 있나야 다고 가리베직 수수가 고액이 다지게 제시 이동와 야야래 마도 아니 야지게 비네 차차발라바 장차발라서 와도 줄로야 발라서 와도 데사임요 데니게 강아 가요 말이지 제사 데니게 딱 강아 데니게 강아 탐제다 자와레스 요 말레스 지산 타라바세도 그래서 강아를 타라바서 강아 균이 메디게 된 네기 차네 강아 메레 소소 류기 차네 강아 메레 저도 데니게 강아 가야 메바 인자다 그비 동알레 주에 타라바세야 돼 제사다 류 타로 톱되면 톱아있나 류리에 강아 용고 말에 안에 얘기 돈에 강아 강아 메바 동아 탐제 자와레 제사 데니게 가사디제 네디게 야고디네 시에서다 제사 데니게 탈베토 가사디길래
So when a being attains liberation, they are liberated from samsara. They are liberated from uncontrolled rebirth within the three realms of samsara. So their body then is quite different from ours in the sense that whilst their body is impermanent, it does not age, it does not suffer from illness or from death in the way that ours does. So there isn't this process of being born as an infant, growing up and experiencing the problems of growing up, and then later the problems of aging, and the problems throughout of illness. No such problems are experienced because this being has attained liberation from problems, liberation from suffering. Likewise from the environment. The environment causes no suffering either. There's no suffering from heat or cold or floods and so forth, because again, this is a being who is liberated from samsara, therefore liberated from suffering.
알레고 샘빙아서 링구로다 유레 강아메 네기 토네 강아메 강도나 강아 가에메 바든지 야고 줘벤다 디고고도 샘빙아서 되어지기로와 제자다 안 디고고여나 다 되바 감숨들레 텔레 타고 거디 마타나 안에 델리 마레스 아디로 하다가 저기 룸버직리아 강아 슈주여바다 베는 요라서 마루다 디네게 자야도야나 남시 토네 강아 슈주여나 델레르네 룸바 현다지리 야치 파기 로고도 셈베 줘로바다 룸바데 다가랑 되고 빼야고 룸바 델레야 차선지 되네 룸바 파셔들 로고 셈베게 삼로 기마로와 제자다 룸바 파셔 야가들로 조세들 드라야게 삼 드라이네 룸바들 어강아도 기우면도 델레들 탄 현다지리 로고 셈베 삼로 기 오래세 이게바는 파셔들 드라야라게 레소 왜 디나시 당아서 감숨 코바들이야 내나서 마바 마토更爱데니게 강아 먹고다 데 탈제 탈비 고마세야 돼 로고도 선비게 다 데니게 탈도게 삼바기나 내래 타는 가 조거스 다 탈비 고마들 로고도 선비 삼바기 도레스 어디 나 당하는 저기 대자니 데니게 탈비 고마치 당하는 대비 감숨이 내리 샤시는 니니데 개발되네 요레스 제자다 경험에서 가르 개발이라는 탈비 고마들 로고 되비라고 디네 여바 있나 나 감숨로 셴바디 셴비기 셴바 차단 이 셴차 삼로디 파 방고 그래스 이 방에는 델레 타제 야 니중 야 탈비 고마들 줘야게 님바디 기리에서 제사디 기리에서 다 감숨로 셴다 예주민세도 감숨로 셴비 셴바들 파 셴바 방바나 셴바디 자바이나 네 탈발에 예중 기리에서 예중에는 안에 디람 공부하는 탈비고와 톱투그리에서
If we could be given an option, would you like to have a body that never experiences suffering, a body that never experiences illness? We'd say, absolutely, I will take that. So this is the kind of outcome one wants to get to. When one recognizes the fault of what we have compared to what is actually possible, then we will give rise to wish for what's actually possible. When one has attained liberation, one does not experience suffering because one is liberated from suffering. Why is one liberated from suffering? Because one is liberated from the causes of suffering, therefore can never experience the results of suffering. Where we can see a semblance of this in the world is those who are living in a country with intense problems. Problems from perhaps the climate, from warfare, from poverty. We know that people there will be looking, is there a solution to this? Perhaps if I can flee to another country, there I will gain freedom from such suffering. And they will, finding out that there is a route by which they can follow to live somewhere else that is free from perhaps civil war, from problems with climate change and so forth, recognizing that there is a route to take to gain such protection from suffering, such freedom from suffering, they will follow it and they'll do everything that possibly can to get there as quickly as possible. So that is the kind of determination we need to generate. That is the meaning of this word, definite emergence. So to develop a mind that is definite about emerging from suffering into a state freed of suffering, one needs to primarily see the faults of samsara and come to recognize the benefits of being freed from samsara, or rather liberated from samsara, and the method to attain such a state. To the extent that these two are seen, the faults of cyclic existence and that this particular method will lead to a state liberated from cyclic existence, to that extent, will give rise to definite emergence. This determination, or being definite about, emerging, arising from these suffering realms into a state freed of suffering. And this is the meaning of the more common translation of renunciation. Renouncing the sufferings of samsara in order to achieve liberation from samsara.
안주게다 감숨랑 안주야 감숨라 셴베게 셴베게 차바다 디니 셴바 주예되로와 딩안주게 감숨라 셴베게 셴바디 가르치는 연구를 해서네 안주게 감숨이 안주 내상디 무연히 수도 하고고 말이지 안주를 나야를 배 야구를 나디고 그래 돈달라 안주 좀 나와나 시죠 말이야 재산 니수도 하고고 말이지 재산다 감숨이 안주게 내상디 무연히 수도 간수도 하고 바이나 어디디 디디 야구면도 내래대 타고 좀 배삼을 끼기리스 지자 되네 장 나 가르쳐 오르스네 감숨라 셴비기 셴바 삼로디 파 도야리야 삼로 갈당 것은 안주게 감숨이 콜비기 내상디 심주의다 하고 가지고 해서 그래. 이 하고 그래서 bendigo 와대 잘라 nyingpo 통배네 그 규제 단다라 무인데서를 부이다고 저 배에 내가 좀 밀다는 nyingpo 통배네 니네 아무것도 앞에 nyingpo도 책임사 지켜요 봐. 어디 야보하고는 저기 어디 밀이야 nyingpo 통고를 이나 규제 템포요 말 지지요 말 디요 말에서 디시도 안 우리 하고 근데 이게 밀이 nyingpo 통배나 디 지금 말 와다. bendigo 지디로와 칼알마서는 칼이야 조어를 신부지는 아들이 김자 하모한테 아 신부도 사실 그러와. 그다음에 제네기 예수들이 하고 가는데서 디샤서 먹고 디디 주를 주수불을 쳐단 되는 얘기를 그 교회 먹고 예디 네 하고 한데 이거 붙이고 말아. 생 말하다. 내가 저 하모한테 사실 디나시 감성 콜비기 내상한테 우인에서도 하모한테 네 감성 거를 신자데 야고래 딜을 하고 디자자 주에 돈을 비슷한 거래서 제자다 감성 콜비 내다다 하고 와 있나 아디 야본 딜에다 타고 있으면 삼 얘기래서 디인사당 한도 당보 데니기 신자에게 삼로도 도야라 아니 마기야래 아 가르삼 당거래서 감성 콜비 내다다 하고 내서 하고 어디 신바지고 그래서 그러다.
So why is it that we cling to the three realms? Why is it do we cling to what actually causes us to suffering? It causes us to suffer. In brief, it's because of being ignorant, of not knowing, of actually not knowing this. We do not recognize what are the sources of suffering. And it's not a mere not knowing, but we actually believe the sources of suffering are sources of happiness. So it is a particularly powerful, confused ignorance. can imagine, draw an illustration to the mind of reaching out for something, believing this will bring happiness. But when we take it, we suffer. When we grasp it, we suffer. And then, not recognizing we're suffering, but not recognizing the cause, again we reach out for it, again we reach out for it. This is the reason why we cling to the three realms. This ignorance of not knowing what are the actual causes of suffering and the causes of liberation. And yet not knowing, this is beyond an intellectual knowledge. This is a deep knowledge that has led to a transformation of how we live our lives. When that comes about, when one has truly recognized the sources of happiness and the sources of suffering, then with this knowledge, the wish to emerge from the sufferings of samsara, to definitely emerge, to gain liberation, this will be unshakable, and one will only accumulate the causes for happiness. One will do one's very best to turn away from the causes of suffering. One will see them for what they are. So, for example, if there is if there's a particular food type, it looks really delicious, but it's actually harmful to you. Maybe you have an allergy, but you do not recognize that this food type, this piece of food, contains the ingredients that you have an allergy for. You're a bit hungry. This looks delicious. You reach out, you take it, you eat it with joy, but then you have a reaction and you're sick again. Whereas on the other hand, if we know that that food type is dangerous for us, attachment won't even arise for it. We'll have an aversion to it. We'll know that is the source of suffering. I need to stay away from it. We won't even have attachment for it. So the reason we are still so bound in cyclic existence is we keep reaching out for that food type that we have an allergy to, eating it, getting sick, not understanding why, and eating that same food again. So what we need to do is challenge this ignorance, eliminate this ignorance, and overcome this view that believes that there is happiness to be found in samsara. That if I have this situation, if I overcome this problem, my life will be better. And recognize, as long as I'm bound in samsara, I will continue to suffer. When this recognition arises, we will have a mind that is definite about emerging. It's definite. It's not a wavering mind. It doesn't come, it doesn't go. It is definite. This is what we need to get to.
Dunga sheba chaos. Chesa sosu dunga said count how watch or dunga how dunga sheba chaos. At the dunga shena dunga the how gone and a culture or lamna dunga you carlet in the hungutus, dampo you the how watch it, then you the bango race, then dunga give you the kunjun sympathetic. Chesa di kunju the you how watch kunjun power, the bango race. Chesa dunga sheba cha kunjun power chas. Chesana and Kunju Pana, Ganis Pankre Lamna, Chesana, Lam Comparchas, Lam Gumpuris, Lam Yams Limpalatine, and Kunju, you pound res, bounce on the currents and go on the chas, go to research, or do so. Chesada Tambo Horasanyi, Dunga Sheba Chas, Dunga the other, how go with your res, Tambotis, some of the Shimjuche, Dunga Kanaka, how go with your res as soon. Dunga you how what didn't the bango race? That in it, Payagi Tablam Garza Lam Gum Gores. The Payagi Tablam di Dunga Gudi Garesha, isn't it? The how go Gores. Chesada Lampang Bango as a Dunga de Kunju de Ganes Bango Rela and the Lamgom the Bango Res or what? The Lamgom the Bang and the Gargi is in a Gortin said, and the Chokunjo Casard, Gortin, Yantis, Togres or that is what. Chesa Dinesa Dambo Corona, Dunga de Hako Gores.
So here, in order to give rise, to generate definite emergence, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, or more accurately translated as the Four Truths for Aryas, with nobles being noble beings. The Four Truths for Aryas. This is the way by which one gives rise to both definite emergence and its result, liberation from samsara, liberation from the three realms. So the Four Noble Truths, the first is true sufferings. So suffering needs to be known, needs to be recognized, because we currently do not recognize suffering as suffering. Here we need to come to know what is suffering. When this is, or to the extent this is known, naturally our mind will turn to the second noble truth, the origins of suffering. Because we'll ask ourselves, now that I know that this is suffering, what is the origin or the cause of suffering? This is the second noble truth, true origins which are to be abandoned. How does one abandon them? That's through the fourth noble truth, true paths. By cultivating the mental paths of the Dharma within, one abandons the origins of suffering, the causes of suffering, and therefore does not experience suffering. And this then leads one to the third noble truth, which is cessation from suffering, true cessations. This is the state of liberation, where one's mind, and therefore oneself, is where oneself becomes liberated from samsara, freed from suffering. So this then is the Four Noble Truths, the method by which one both generates definite emergence and gains liberation from cyclic existence. True sufferings need to be known, then that one seeks out their causes, their origins, and to abandon those origins, one cultivates true paths in order to achieve true cessations.
Anda da dunga shebar chasen da dunga setting an ju ha ko ko re se da dini ke ha ko le no samlo ga sta da dunga ga ne yung du se bi da dunga da sam ta be na da nga ju le je bi dunga ga yu dunga na yu dunga chi yu dunga yo re la da je ga na chi yu dunga se da bu ro je yo de ne ga nga shi yo re bu je yo de ne ba je du ne ne ga nga chi dunga shi ngo re den ma je de ne ya an ba je ne ya che Nyingpo cha ni de Nyingpo cha do shu de ne ya che ke gyuen shi wa da ga dunga se gyuen cha ro gyuen chi mo ro wa an para kap para ya bene na ya ge ga ma ngo yung ro wa an ga sam ji ya ra me ba su shi ye ge de me ne shi de ge yung ro wa ji de ye ga ni ji bi dunga ga yu dunga na yu du chi yu du wa se on du shi ne nga zu ge de ge ba ne ko wa le de ge wa ne gyundine de duwa sebege de samdai deneje da ngazu disu tingazu ha gogor de ne di gyun yin ba da dunga yin ba de tingazu samdang go ma wa.
The first noble truth, or the first truth for Aryas, is true sufferings, sufferings which are to be known. The sufferings are presented in many ways. One way is to look at a fourfold presentation of the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. So here the reflection is on the suffering of the experience of birth, of entry into a new body. Then the process of aging, which begins in the very next moment, and then of course continues throughout the life. And there are innumerable sufferings relating to this process of aging, again, from the moment of birth throughout life. And then there's the suffering related to periodic sickness. And then finally, the suffering of death, dying without control over one's death. That death befalls one in a time, in a manner not that of one's choosing. One has no control over it. So mentioning these four sufferings, birth, aging, sickness, and death, it's very easy to dismiss this and say, of course, I know this. But this first noble truth, true sufferings, are to be known. And this meaning of word knowing here is not this mere intellectual understanding, but it's a visceral understanding that leads to a determination to seek out the causes, because one does not want to suffer like this again. That is the meaning of knowing.
예, 개와단, 가와단, 나와다, 치와대, 통로어대나, 균인바딩 하도 셈리야, 아주 균리샤, 셈비게, 셈딩기, 균인바하고 마도, 리티리샤. 나되네, 나도 삼다도 스타베나, 되네, 아주 가리운 것은 데베드 미주베도 말 그래서 소수 고야 되게 변해야 지게 소수기 데베드 아니 지게 소수기 엘레 총으로 지 된다 주보네 디스에 마주바 아니 소수고 고야게 잘라라고네 디스에 라마투바 아니 지게 디니기 데베드 마루 소소리아 가로 야고라와 디어 소수 되바나지 마라와 제나다 총다 소수기 된다 야고라고 디스에 소수 되바나지 마주바 디니기 소수 데베드인데 마주베 토난데 셈제 어다 디중마서 니중마서 셈제는 가서 강한 문구를 디스가 저기 디 용가서 냠수 용고를 되네 당은 저기 디 데네셔 백견레샤 셈베 삼동 삼단거 말에 세상 한줄에 대비돼 마주비기 딱 강한 문구요 아다딩이 디지주마서 니라마서 지디마서 세도신 대비돼 마주바지 강아지 그래서 야치 소수기 예대 바데 두바단 제비기 동아용 그래서 어다 대딩이 잘알 어디 쉬어서지 베네 소수게 벤저라나 아니지 어디 구마게 시켜야지 바디 라야게 그냥 는지 소수게 가보니만나 카제줘야 지게 지게네 셈제 안 되네지 소수게 여바디게 파 매바 차조서 셈베게다 두바단 대비 동아 어디네게 셈제 망고 용거래서 다디서 안주 냠수 용거를 가서 하고 그거를 용거를 된다 딩한주게 어디 비견에 샤셈베 교인 받다고 마 타고 통고 마다 내서 차상 교인에서 왔다가 이제 홀비 교인에서 왔죠 차상.
Further points by which to reflect on suffering is the suffering of not getting what we want, despite striving for it. And this is something we have too much experience of, whether it's for a particular job that one really hopes to get and maybe does a lot of preparation to try and get the job, but does not. Or maybe one is working, enjoying one's work, but really wants a promotion. And despite working so hard, not getting the promotion. Or maybe one is single and there's someone that you like, but they don't like you in the same way. So these are, again, experiences of suffering that we have in abundance, but we haven't really come to recognize this as suffering. Hence, we keep striving for things that cannot lead to happiness. And this then can take us to another suffering, which is being separated from the wanted. In other words, where you have something and you hold at it as if it is supposed to last forever, but it cannot. It is impermanent. And we lose it. It can be a relationship. It can be a valued possession, something we have strong, that has strong sentimental value for it, and it breaks or gets stolen. So again, this is something we have so much experience of. So we can easily recognize this suffering, but it has that recognition is not yet deep within us enough to lead to a change of behavior, lead us to recognize that these things that I'm striving for, they are in samsara. They will end up in suffering. That is the deep level of recognition we need to come to.
Teneya do some Sunday Momba maybe do us, Momba Meva, social yachic, Chumwena, Adele digo, Denu digo, Din digos, social digation, I did Denu digo, digos and big denege. That man is a 2-year-old in a society, Garoro is in a carina, Chumwena, and Dile Hava, who's in a bed, Scott Devat, Gayagini Medigan, said, and the Nigit on a chick, the delay chick goes and some, the nigger some that the same day, and a Ganga, which is a Momba maybe do my research.
Further type of suffering to meditate on is that of insatiability, where when we do get what we want, that never satiates us beyond a moment. We always want more. And this, again, is something we have abundant experience of, yet we keep desiring ever more, despite never being satiated, despite it never being enough. And this we can look at in terms of material possessions, in terms of food, whatever it may be, even relationships, not being satisfied, always wanting something new, something better, or the same again and again.
제사당 한지 점리 나라 녀라 몽골리에디 삼로디 비긴지와 데베데 미두베기 데베데 미두베 동아 예데 소소게 된다데 마두베 아데 두고 셈베디 두투미데 동아 예디 디두베게 된다라 데니 셴고 타야 아니 셴레 원여시야 아니 지 탑시에 강다에 토네 셴리아 아니 지 마자 좀고야라 소바다 디소랑이 데베 된 미두베 동아 슈시모게 바자 디 겐제네다 딜레 야체 동아 야체 셴레야 동아 강아 먹을 개셨던 거로와 얘네 누베 되나 누바단 제외 동아서 어다디 게디 디 야호르 디 현다가 초로서 콘주이 테서는 얘네 야디 송급체 돈달이야 향시야 지금 마제야레 추보자레 강아제 데니기 토네 디 용거로와 다 원밤에서 소소 여배는 너누디 고구도스는 한 현하진 초에게 한바시야디 데니 토네 아니 지금 마초게다 강아제 지소나래 미케르 소소라나 이나데 지비도나 데네 망고질리고로 와다 두 삼다는 안쪽에 지게 요라 망고지여바디 데베디 미주베 동아 두바단 데베 동아 삼로여바 원바 메베 삼로 디기 겐기 다 랑강아 샤야강아 제리 요아디 나 지소나 요아디 디차고로 와다 삼로 디베 겐기
When one meditates on suffering, one can look at the world around one as inspiration or as quite an easy way to see examples of these sufferings. So, for example, we see not the suffering I mentioned earlier of not getting what you want despite striving for. We see how this is so pervasive in our society. People striving for something because they're clinging to it as a source of happiness, and in order to get it, they make problems. They may cause warfare, they may deceive others, they may steal from others, and so forth. And even if they're not doing anything so overtly wrong, it will consume their time, their job, and so forth. Consume their time and their energy. And likewise with insatiability, we can see this around us, how people are not content, are always looking for something new. So when one sees this around you, then immediately take it as inspiration to look within and recognize that same mind within you. This is imperative because the outcome to come to is to recognize one's clinging at these samsaric events, these samsaric experiences as being a source of happiness worthy of my effort. And this is the delusion of samsara. That is what we need to abandon. This is recognizing suffering.
제사다 심바미비 동아서 차라균이메데 아주 레가라실레나 가레나직 레가데 직제다 차라균이메데 직제데 직제와 되네게 다 디아지오라 다 지사야 디차산다 디지오라 신에 마시 바도 차라균이요 말하시 제다 되네게 레가라실레제 차라균이메데가 되네 강아죠 레제 심바미비게 다 오저 강아세데 되네시에서
A further way to look at suffering is looking at how one's striving for these fake sources of pleasure never comes to an end. One is not only is one never content, but it's one after the other. We know this from how busy our lives are. We are continuously seeking something new, something to engage our mind, engage our body with, and exhausting us. There is no end to this striving. We are yet to reach a point where this is now enough. We're always looking for more.
두시네 삼다에 동아에게 두시네 내서 두시네 삼다에 두시네 삼다에 디제도 와서 배우인에서 예 임바디 소소야 매번 예준 거로와 난디나제 다야 삼다에 동아들이야 동아유 동아 유유 동아 잡아두시 동아 세디 두시네 삼다에 제가 동아기 동아세도 만주기 류려야 내나서 주네 동아라고 소아라고 녀야 될이야 내내게다 지게 자가려 고나야 강바나야 라바나야 되는 수바다 아마라 나에게 소아 동아 녀야 되지 동아이 동아라세 두시네 동아 삼다야 지금 차거래.
Further ways to look at suffering is the suffering of physical and mental pain. So this is again, something we're very aware of, but we need to develop our awareness to the point of renouncing the causes that lead to the suffering. So we are very aware of the aches and pains in the body, the illness that we experience, mental unhappiness, and so forth. These too are expressions of suffering that beings in samsara will experience. Further means to meditate on suffering is the suffering of transient happiness, or commonly translated as the suffering of change. So the suffering of transient happiness, this refers to all the commonly accepted sources of happiness in our world. So this is everything that we strive for, and is what people around us, beings around us, strive for, believing that attaining this, I will have happiness. A nice meal, a meal of sufficient quantity, whatever it may be. We strive for these things because we believe they will bring us happiness. So the second type of, there's further type of happiness, the suffering of transient happiness. There we come to recognize that despite hoping the happiness will last, it never does. It's transient. It changes. So one may finally be in a position of some power or influence at work or in a relationship. This will change. This will not last. And even if what is around you isn't changing, you will change. You will no longer be happy with what you have because you're insatiable. This need is insatiable. Likewise with wealth. We strive for wealth, or to express it in a nicer way, financial security. But how often does one really achieve financial security? And even if one does, one is worried because the situation may change and one may no longer be secure. Or one achieves one's goal in its financial security, but doesn't feel secure and works forevermore. None of these sources of happiness in our world lead to happiness. So this is the suffering of transient happiness, where we recognize that what we strive for, even if we achieve it, doesn't lead to happiness. It's cold, so we turn on the heater, then we complain now we're too hot. We're hungry, we eat, and then we complain we ate too much. This shows that we place our hopes can never lead to the lasting happiness we seek, because this happiness is transient.
Onda kyaba dujige dunga sida ngan zugu pungbo diksi or pungbo de leda nyumo wachi pungbo res ngan pungbo de kyaba dujige dunga res. Zan di da digi kanga digi dela tene nga zu dunga se de ga ngan zugu pungbo dela tene yongore yu dunga se de yang ngan zu pungbo dela tene yongore ngan zugu lu di yo ba za da yu dunga ane dunga di lu dela tene yongore. Zan ki yu dunga ga yu dunga ane na yu du 칭여 두에 되게 만주 류대라 되는 용거래 제산다 내내기 류대 최게 니 된다려 양아지 레베데 마르베 두마 안두바나 데베 두마세데 그래서 류대라 되는 용거 제산다 류디 레다 녀모 옹유주 류대라 되네다 긴 마소나 강한 뭐 용사데 된 디기 된지거래 강한 뭐 용사에 된디 디지거래 제산도 류디다 다 괜데네기 괜데 미자의 류 되네야 다 미사의 추고시 와 하는데 미사와 세세기 추现那些的时候那这 nganzo kala sa deni ma jede ningba ba ji zo go sue de du sin jesa deni lü di du sin de sam da wei na jesa mi zao ko chu wo na xin lü tele deni lü ko rong ani yu yuan ne na sa mang bu yong de ya ya yu wa zhuo de gen guo cha yue de ben de le deni ani ji de sting de lü de deni de he le ju na ani ga zhe le na yong lü yu yue dong ya jesa de yu yue dong a dang 동아의 동아 영야다 가유의 동아다 치유의 동아다 아니 나유의 동아 기유의 동아 사상 류딜라 되는 연구를 해서 류디 아주 레다 녀모 아주 류디다 캬바투지 동아를 해야 돼. 다디 류딜라 되는 게 뭐야 디디야 류디 야구민도 와서 비게 하고 그러다 띵한지 하고 그거 말와 세상 되는 류기 되는 게 뭐고 리그여 봐 류딜라 되는 연구여 봐 하고 그래 해야 돼.
Further type of suffering is the all-pervasive suffering of conditionality. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what it refers to is these aggregates that we have, these 5 aggregates. We express that slightly differently, this physical body and our mind. These are pervaded by suffering. They are in the very nature of suffering, or they rather then naturally are a basis upon which we suffer. And this is something that most of you will know intellectually from your Dharma teachings, but it is not how we relate to this body. It's not how we relate to these mental aggregates either. So let's talk further. So firstly, it's because we have these aggregates, this body and mind, that has come about in dependence on contaminated karma and afflictions, that we suffer. This is why we do not experience lasting happiness. But the happiness we strive for is only transient. It is why we experience the sufferings of not getting what we want. It's why we experience physical pain and so forth. It's because of having these aggregates we experience all the other types of suffering. If we did not have this contaminated body and mind, we would not suffer. So here we need to have an honest look at this body, because the way we relate to it is, again, ignorant. It is not in accordance with reality. We are surprised, disappointed, upset when we are sick, when that is just the very nature of this contaminated body. Sickness will come. Not only that, we do wish we looked differently, that our body was different, our features were different, because we have this hope that through how this body looks to others, we will experience happiness. Happiness cannot be achieved in this way. Moreover, in terms of aging, we have this hope. We do so many things to try and either prevent aging or to mask our aging, but this is the very nature of this body. It is in the process of decline. So the way we relate to this body is not at all how it exists. Hence, but by recognizing this, we can see the extent of our delusion. It's reinforced by society, but we need to see this within ourselves. Recognize that as long as we have a contaminated body, contaminated mental aggregates, we will suffer.
탈바톱책이 가사 되길래 디치강아 되게 강해요 말다. 탈바톱이 다쳐봤다 다쳐봤고 디수길이야 탈바톱사는 내게 강아 되게 강해요 그 말에.
Whereas someone who has attained liberation from the 3 realms, liberation from cyclic existence, who has attained the result of a renunciate, such a person does not suffer in these ways at all.
나도 지는 삼다에 되는 동아도 하고 그래시라 다 오다 코와세에 동아라지 다 진짜 쉐도 왔으면 동아 하고 그래서 난 대소는 가능스 줘래서 나다 대소 가르치는 가능스 연구를 해서 다 유단 게임해 봐요 말 유단 게임을 되는 용어래 다디 가르 유가래라네 내다 녀모 받는 얘기해서 근데다 내다 녀모 봐시도 아주 코와래 게임을 레시사 사고래서 내래 되는 기호래 레대야 녀모 받는 용어래지 제가 되는 자다 내다 녀모 받는 용어래 제가 다 규디 당한 저기 베네 신로지 두신로시나 야 로마드 바 제전에 자원 막고는 얘기야 얘기인 거로 지선 동화 삼단에 동화 직 매주제 매와 소변에 야사바 이거로 봐 제사다 자와 호롱기 레단 요모 유게 유 레단 요모 바디 매바스요 그래 제사다 레단 요모 바디 다 동화 탐제 계획이 코위 코갈게 레가 규디 레단 요모 바레샤스는 다 규디 하고 가지 다 레단 요모 바디 빵구도 선배게다 코위 동화 델레다 탈구도 델레 타발라 규니에 레단 요모 바디 빵구도 선배게 두신다 코갈레 탈두기 감숨라 시엠바메 가진 거리에서 감술람 시엠바메 가든 코갈레 탈지는 타나 가와기 오르신다 탈바세 토구도 우스베 다 코갈레 탈지 데니게 탈바세야디 코위 규레라 녀모바 빵비 빵지 탈지 델레 빵비게 탈바세 토구도 세베 다 타바되니 삼바디 기그리 예제 두시는 아주 둥아디 파시 두 삼도 전 삼다 다데도 삼다 데니게 삼다네 둥의 규레라 녀모바 기고레스 두 삼다네 데니게 삼다데 다 델레 타구도 세베 다 탈되기 다 디디 강아레세 델레다 마타는 지금은 세베기 탈되게 삼바 슈심을 이그래 타는데 가르쳐 보고선 다 탈바세 토보도 세베기 탈바 통역이 된 두바디 기교레서 제사 데니인자 데니기 타바되니 삼바 기윤데 코발레 신비 신바디 바가고 용고 말해지 신바도 다니듯이 해서 숨어라.
So I hope it's clear from this brief presentation on suffering what it means to come to know suffering, that one gains this or develops this deep visceral reaction to suffering, recognizing just how deluded we have been thus far and not wanting to do so again. This will naturally lead to the second noble truth. How does this come about? What is the origin of this? It doesn't come about causelessly. It comes about independence on causes. So independence then on excellent prior meditation on suffering, we will want to know what those causes are. And if we know then clearly what those causes are, with our whole heart, we will strive to gain freedom from them, to be definite in our emerging from those causes and their resultant suffering. So what are the causes of our suffering? Well, it comes about in dependence on karma. So karma is a cause, but karma itself is caused. Karma comes about in dependence on a deeper cause, the afflictions. From the afflictions, we accumulate karma that keeps us bound in samsara. This needs to be recognized, and recognize that the afflictions too have a gradient in terms of coarser and subtler. When this is recognized, one will strive to eradicate the causes. It's just like when you want to beautify your garden and you see weeds in the grass, you know that mowing the lawn is insufficient. You have to weed. You have to pull out the weeds by the roots. Otherwise, they will just grow back. So merely dealing with karma is insufficient. One has to eradicate the cause of karma, of this contaminated karma, the afflictions. When one has recognized first, or come to know first suffering, and then sort out the origin of suffering, the causes of suffering, one will strive with one's whole heart to definitely emerge from the suffering realms of samsara. Or to express it differently, one will want to separate oneself from the three realms and attain liberation. Because once a person has achieved liberation, they will never suffer again. Finally, they've achieved happiness, but a happiness that is lasting and stable. To achieve that, one needs to give rise to definite emergence, this determined attitude to emerge from samsara, which comes about in dependence on recognizing the causes of suffering, which comes about in dependence on recognizing suffering itself.
디네 자다는 저기 감숨래 야 니치 신발 자신 기대배나 니죠 델레 탈되게 삼방 니죠 기기 말에스 안데 가르치고 해서네 감숨래 신비기 차바돼야 될이야 근데 그건 저기 동화 삼당 오레스 대 동화 삼당 하될이야 다 데니기 직된도 수수 삼당 직되기 마 두시시로와 지자 동화 삼당 다 동화 삼당 오다 감숨래 요라디네 동화들레 탈구도와 선배디니 감숨의 셴비기 셴바 도와대 내 예중 기기에서 감숨의 셴마 감숨의 셴나 예중민 이 도저라 감숨의 마신나 예중 기기에서 예중 인사지 고로 제가 되게 감숨의 셴바 도야 되라 둥아디기 바시야 바지 둥아 도수 삼다 둥아시야 바지 둥아 유군주되기 시야 바지 도시에 되게 삼다도 안데 둥아이 바하고 생애바 셈리양애바 이도 오다다 델레데 타고도 셈비게 삼다네 되네 예중 기기에서 나타네 탈바고 토고도 셈비 예중 기기에서 어두시는 거다 디리쇼에 감숨세리 셴바께서 유디 감숨 되바다 되베카나 수감숨에 감숨세 셴바세데다 델라 차징디 베 야고레스 진되겐데라 셴바세 다디 도에게 탑람델라 가르조스네 근데 둥아템바티 둥아임바 두삼다나 두스tam고레스 나 둥아이교 곤중 에다 녀모바티게 두시레세 두삼다나시 두시네시네 데네 디 삼다베나 하고요데 데네 감숨데 셴바 도그레스 나 데네 셴바 도바자 데네게나 데 감솔레 데니 타바나 가르고고레스네 코발레 탈피 타르바 나 강아 탐제단 제비기 디기 푼손 소고 예디 캔게 나 고마데 토쿠두 셈비기 돈ye 기기리 에세지 어두시에레 나디 쇼에 디시바레 나 닝고 geb롱어서 가르시게선 나디 토베기 탑람 람냠슬린데 람냠 람 안에 곰바차스 람감 곰나디 간데 곰고레 에세디 어디 골마시야지
So this morning, we've looked at this second line. If you cling to the three realms, you're not a renunciate. And as long as one is clinging to the three realms, one will not give rise to definite emergence. One will not renounce the sufferings and their causes of samsara. So therefore, one has to here meditate deeply on suffering. And I mentioned a number of ways to look at suffering, in terms of birth, aging, sickness, and death, in terms of being separated from the wanted, or not getting what you want despite striving for it, and then the further presentation of insatiability, and then also in terms of the suffering of physical and mental suffering, and the suffering of transient happiness, and the suffering of the aggregates. So these are several of the ways to look at suffering. There are a few more in addition to this. But one needs to look closely at suffering to come to recognize, by being mindful of one's mental attention, seeing where one's mind is drawn, look at that and see, am I being drawn by my attachment to something that will actually result in suffering? And in this way, challenge this deep desire we have for this and that and the next thing, all of which just end up resulting in suffering, end up resulting in us remaining bound in samsara. The conclusion of this reflection on suffering is to recognize there is nothing worth desiring or striving for within samsara. Nothing at all. There is nothing that I can attain that will lead to happiness, that will lead to lasting happiness, and then give rise to a determination to emerge from this state. And that will lead one to seek out the causes. And then when one seeks out the causes as well, one knows what one is wanting to emerge from, what turn away from. This is how one generates definite emergence, how one becomes a renunciate. And then this afternoon, we'll talk about then how to fulfill this ambition, how to actually abandon cyclic existence, how to gain liberation from samsara. So we'll talk about the path, the mental paths to cultivate the antidotes to suffering and samsara. Then thank you. We'll conclude there for this morning. Thank you.